Speaker.
Call the Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, this bill is an appropriate and timely response to Canterbury's massive earthquake on September 4. It's an exceptional bill, but it is exceptional circumstances. It's a realistic bill given the scale of the challenge we have in rebuilding Christchurch and its surrounding communities. It is a bill that's designed to take us smoothly from emergency to recovery. It's important we consider this bill in the context of the Canterbury earthquake being the most costly natural disaster in the history of our country. The release of energy at 4:31 on Saturday from this 7.1 magnitude earthquake is the equivalent of 1,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs. Engineers prefer to measure earthquakes by ground horizontal acceleration levels because it is these that actually cause the building damage. The Canterbury earthquake recorded accelerations of 1.26 G at Greendale. That is, the horizontal force exerted on buildings was 1.26 times the gravity and is like tipping up a building like this Parliament on its end and then putting it back again. These are the highest ever recorded on a New Zealand seismograph and amongst only a very few of that size globally. Yes, we are fortunate that it occurred at an hour when most people were at home in bed. But the main reason the casualties were so low is that New Zealand post-Napier earthquake 1931 implemented building standards that ensured their structural integrity under such an earthquake. Christchurch owes much to two remarkable Cantabrians, Professor Bob Park and Tom Paulet, both now deceased, who set the global standard for the design of earthquake-resistant buildings and bridges in the 1960s and 70s. That no modern building or bridge built to these standards failed is a huge tribute to the quality of their successful research, the work of their successors, and the hundreds of engineers they trained. Numbers tell a powerful story. It's already been mentioned that the Haiti earthquake at the beginning of the year of 7.0 magnitude killed 230,000. In the Sichuan province in China, their earthquake in May 2008, 7.9, killed 69,000. The Kashmir 7.6 earthquake in 2005 killed 79,000 people. The San Francisco earthquake, 6.9, killed 63. The Kobe earthquake in another developed country in 1995, magnitude 6.8, killed over 6,000. We can be justifiably proud of the design standards that proved their worth last Saturday. I must also join others in paying tribute to our civil defence and emergency staff, both nationally and locally, on their response over the last 10 days. While in Christchurch at the weekend, I caught up with Professor Green from the United States, who has visited the site of almost every major earthquake in the last 2 decades. He noted that the organisation of the response in Christchurch and Canterbury was the best he had seen and set the standard internationally. That's a huge compliment to the hundreds of professionals and volunteers who have been working so hard over the past 10 days. Our challenge with this bill is to ensure we continue that excellence as we move from emergency to the recovery phase of this disaster. This is going to get harder, not easier. There are some very difficult judgments to be made about what heritage buildings should be demolished and to be on repair and those that must be saved. Tough calls will also need to be made on which areas can and should be built on, which areas need some form of geotechnical ground improvement before rebuilding, and which areas are too unstable to safely reconstruct on. The enormous challenges in making these important judgments quickly but correctly. Nobody wants people unable to live in their homes or be able to resume trade in their businesses for a day longer than is necessary. Yet the decisions made over the next few months will impact on Christchurch and Canterbury for a century or more. Getting the framework right for these decisions is vital. This bill creates the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Commission to lead that work. It links the work of central, regional and local government. It makes sure we work in harmony through this recovery and reconstruction phase. The bill provides the necessary override provisions from current acts. For instance, we don't want our council staff spending the next several months filling out the many forms required for the retrospective approval of the demolition of buildings that has already come down during the civil emergency. Nor do we want officials applying for consents for discharges that inevitably have occurred into Canterbury's waterways. If we are to get through the recovery phase as quickly and as efficiently as possible, we need to be very focused on the right priorities, and that is on rebuilding the houses and infrastructure of Canterbury as quickly as possible. As one of the 3 responsible ministers listed in the bill, I want to assure the House that these powers will be used sparingly. In the early stages of drafting this bill, we attempted to identify with officials the very specific provisions we would need to amend. We rapidly came to a conclusion that that would be impossible. There were so many issues, we would inevitably get it wrong, and the only practical way forward was this sort of generic empowering bill. In the coming months, it requires trusts and goodwill to work, and I, like the Minister in charge of it, Jerry Brownlee, appreciate the cooperative way in which opposition parties have approached this bill. There have been questions raised about the geographic provisions of the bill and why they deliberately are orientated towards the impacts of the earthquake and not just the geographic area of the districts of Selwyn, Waimakariri and Christchurch City. That is with good reason. For instance, the landslide that's being dealt with in the northern part of Canterbury is outside those districts but is related to the earthquake recovery. Equally so, the Cape landfill that is taking the bulk of the waste, again, outside of that district, but these provisions of this bill may be needed. There's also been questions around the specific acts. We have attempted to list all those acts in this bill, but again, it is inevitable that we will not know all of the issues, and so the flexibility is provided for in this bill. Mr. Speaker, 2 decades ago I completed my PhD in geotechnical engineering at the University of Canterbury. I studied liquefaction, earthquakes and landslides from a very academic perspective. None of that prepared me for my visit at the weekend to Canterbury and the sight of uprooted houses, wrecked bridges, collapsed buildings, split stop banks and fractured pipe systems. The forces at work are indescribable, but this disaster has brought out the very best in people. My favourite story has been the Facebook-driven droves of young people getting out and helping the people of Canterbury with the clean-up. This bill is about Parliament doing its bit, giving us a commission and the necessary powers to get on with the most difficult part, the rebuilding of New Zealand's second largest city. With patience, goodwill, cooperation and tapping into New Zealand's world-renowned engineering expertise, we can rebuild a better, a safer and a cleaner Christchurch. I commend the bill.